Loud. All right. I was warned. All right. Sorry, everybody. Anyway, the goal of Open Door Media is to make Jewish and Israel education accessible to all through different forms of media, through podcasts, videos, films, and articles. His YouTube channel has almost 50,000 subscribers, and his website for educators makes content for nearly 1,500 organizations. He is also the host of a new popular podcast called Unpacking Israeli History. Noam wrote his dissertation on Israel education and identity development, and and that's it. Okay. Anyway,
Lisa,
Noam, go.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi Steinberg. Thank you to the Hollywood community. First of all, it's been an incredible few weeks. It's a strange way to start, living in a new place during a global pandemic, but just the community has been incredible. Moving from LA to Hollywood, just unbelievable families all around, and it's been such a joy, a real joy to start getting to know people, old friends, amazing old friends like the Rosenzweigs and the Lustmans, and meeting new friends. And so it's just been such an incredible experience the first few weeks here. I'm excited tonight to share with you a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about. As those who know me well and those who will get to know me well, as I get pretty passionate about any topic that I dig that I sink my teeth into, whatever that topic is. And if it's about Jewish identity, if it's about Israel, if it's about getting to really care about any sort of topic, I really start wanting to make sure that other people feel the excitement and the passion and the joy in the topic that I feel. So what I want to start with your permission, Lisa.
Yes.
Is I want to start with a video of mine. Yesterday was the 25th anniversary, 25th yahrzeit of 25th yahrzeit of Yitzchak Rabin, and it's an incredibly important day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share just the first 2 minutes of a video on Yitzchak Rabin, one of the many videos that my organization produces, like Lisa said, to make Jewish and Israel education accessible to anyone and everyone. So let me just go to it really quickly. You go to the YouTube channel, you could go wherever, but I'm going to show it to you from here. Let's see. So this month is called Israel. This is an example of all the different videos that are on Unpacked. And I'm going to show this video on Yitzchak Rabin and his life and his assassination. So I'm going to let's watch the first minute or so.
Yitzchak Rabin, Israel's 5th prime minister, was a complicated figure, both revered and reviled. Ultimately, he was a man of paradoxes, a war hero and a peacemaking icon, hawkish and dovish, yet pragmatic, socially awkward, yet a dignified international statesman who is credited with engineering some of Israel's boldest geopolitical decisions. Now, when you think of Rabin, these apparent contradictions may not be what comes to mind. It's likely you think of his dramatic assassination. But who was Yitzchak Rabin, and what made him Israel's most paradoxical and perhaps most famous politician? Let's dive in. Rabin was born in Jerusalem on March 1st, 1922. A secular Jew, Rabin studied at a prestigious agricultural school where he befriended Yigal Allon, a future leader of the Palmach, the elite strike force of Israel's pre-state Zionist militia. In 1941, just shy of his 20th birthday, Rabin began the transition from farmer to the front lines. That year, Rabin joined his friend Allon in the Palmach, where he blossomed into a distinguished leader. In 1946, tensions were high between British officials in the Mandate and Jewish establishment figures and underground leaders. Caught up in their struggle for liberation, Rabin was arrested during Black Saturday, a massive British operation to crack down on Jewish resistance. He was detained in a British prison for 5 months. After his release in 1947, Rabin was appointed chief of operations of the Palmach, setting the stage for his key involvement in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War.
I'm going to I'm going to stop there just to get us started, to get us understanding what this content is all about. And I want to just have a conversation now about why I think yesterday and this week is a particularly important time of year, and specifically this year.
Well, you know what, Noam, I was going to ask you, why are you talking about Rabin today? Ordinarily, we would have some shaliach with a great Israeli accent, with some war stories. Why are you the one that's going to be educating us about Rabin?
So great question, Lisa. And this is something that I think about super often. So one of the things that I want to make clear to pretty much American Jewry in general is there is an issue right now. There's a divide between America and Israel, American Jews and Israeli Jews. I've written about this sort of thing very often. I'm not going to get into a political discussion, but I'm going to describe something, which is that the vast majority of Israeli Jews preferred Donald Trump to become the president. The vast majority of American Jews preferred that it be Joe Biden. So I'm not here to talk about which one is right. That's not my job. Very inyane diyoma right now. But what I can tell you is that there is a divide. And one of the things that I want to do is to make sure that there's a bridge between American Jews and Israeli Jews. We need to make sure that we stop outsourcing, this is my take, that we stop outsourcing our connection to Israel to Israelis. We have to make sure that we start developing the relationship to Israel and the Jewish people from within. So, one of the things that that really bugs me is thinking about the rhythm of the day, the rhythm of the time period, the rhythm of a certain culture. This past week, actually previous week, Yud Bet Cheshvan was the 25th yahrzeit of Yitzchak Rabin throughout Israel, in religious communities, in the secular communities. The focus was on Yitzchak Rabin. I spoke to a few educators recently, and I said, hey, listen, what are you doing for Yitzchak Rabin's yahrzeit? What are you doing? And they're like, it's the PSATs. And that notion that the rhythm of our lives in America is different than the rhythm of our lives in Israel is something that I want to work on with the American Jewish community. For Israel, and for really Jews across the world, this moment, Rabin's assassination 25 years ago, was equivalent to either 9/11 or the JFK assassination. That's what it was. And if we're a Jewish people, we have to make sure that we Americans feel the same sort of passion, the same sort of conviction for someone like Yitzchak Rabin and the magnitude of that event. And one of the things that I think that happens in life is if I were to take a group of students, right? I have a student of mine on this call right now, right? If I were to take a group of students to the Lincoln Memorial, right? My guess is there wouldn't be tears shed. It wouldn't be such a sad moment. It wouldn't be devastating. And the last thing that I want, specifically at this point in life, in this generation, is for people to feel that way about Yitzchak Rabin, that they go to Kikar Rabin in Israel or have an event like this, and they're not thinking deeply, they're not emotionally connected to this moment. We don't want Yitzchak Rabin's yahrzeit to feel like the Lincoln Memorial right now, right? We want to make sure that we feel it. We want to make sure that we understand it. So for me, that's why it's so important as an American Jew to be speaking about this day and why it's really critical for all of us.
Noam, would you like to maybe speak as to why he was such an important figure in modern Jewish history?
Yeah, how much time do you have?
I'll give you 3 minutes to answer that question.
You're not getting 3 minutes. You could cut me off at 10 though. So that's what I'll say. Listen, the November 4th, 1995 for me was a Saturday night. That was pretty typical. I was watching, maybe this is familiar to those of my generation, I was watching Walker, Texas Ranger with my older brother, Hanan. The younger people in this call have no idea what I'm talking about. The people who are my age probably know I'm talking about Saturday Night TV, those of you who are allowed to watch it. And I distinctly remember my parents walking down the stairs in Baltimore, Maryland. And I was raised in like a Fabrenta religious Zionist home, like Yom HaAtzmaut, Bracha, the whole deal, right? Yom HaAtzmaut, actually, in my house was an incredibly sad day because...
No, I'm here in Hollywood. We get more people for our Yom HaAtzmaut program than we do for Kol Nidre.
That's why we moved here. We heard about that. We heard about that. Yeah, we heard about that. But we got to work on Yom Kippur then here as well. But anyway, so like that was the kind of house I grew up in. And I remember my parents walking down the stairs, both of them with tears in their face, and just, sharing the news that Yitzchak Rabin, I was 10 years old. And sharing the news that Yitzchak Rabin was assassinated. And then they told me that he was assassinated by a Jew. That a Jew killed another Jew. And I wanted to make sure, I was 10 years old. I didn't know anything. I liked basketball, I liked sports. I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't like let me learn about Yitzchak Rabin. But it was a moment that stayed with me. And there was another moment actually from the previous year. I don't know if you remember this, from October 1994, I think it was October, when Nachshon Weissman was abducted. And I remember watching that whole experience in my 25-inch Zenith boxy TV, and just hoping. I actually wanted to name one of our children Nachshon. My wife insisted otherwise. She didn't like the name, but just it didn't work for us. But that moment stuck with me. 9 years old. And the previous year, when I was 8, I remember Yitzchak Rabin limpingly, awkwardly shaking the hands of Yasser Arafat, and just that being a huge moment. And so Yitzchak Rabin, who was he? I want to make sure we know who this man was, because he wasn't some dove. He wasn't some lefty liberal that some might paint him to be. That's not who he was. I want to make sure that we all understand who this man was. I'll do it quickly. 1948, he was one of the leaders of the Palmach and involved actually in removing certain Palestinian Arabs from certain communities in Ramle and Lida, right? In 1967, he was the man who, together with Weissman, helped make sure that Israel had this idea to have a preemptive strike, right? The reason we have the West Bank, the reason we got Gaza, the reason we got Sinai, the reason we got Golan, the reason we tripled in size as a state is because of Yitzchak Rabin, Weissman, and Moshe Dayan. Then later on in 76, he was the prime minister that oversaw the operation Entebbe. Huge, famous moment that Menachem Begin, his rival, said, you know what, letters to Yoni Netanyahu, he might get credit, Mookie Betts might get credit, Shimon Peres, but Tachlis, you were the prime minister of the time. At the end of the day, you're the one that things fall back on. You get the credit for it, right? 87, the first Intifada. For those of us who remember, Rabin was described as, by the Palestinians there, he said, let's break their bones. This was not some weak, soft, pacifist. And then in 1993, he finally said this line. He said, I was a military man for 27 years. I fought as long as there was no chance for peace. I believe there's a chance now, a great chance, and we must take advantage of it. Now, whether or not you think he was right or you think he was wrong, he is somebody who said, this is what I want to do. He had all the gravitas as a military man. He was successful in that entire realm. So much credit is owed to Yitzchak Rabin. But at the end of the day, 1993, he said, I want to give this a shot. And he did. And he started giving it a shot. But then some crazy things happened. The first year of Oslo, 1993, there were more Israeli deaths than in any year of the first Intifada. And there was a lot of back and forth. Is this right? Is this wrong? And, in the religious Zionist world, which is where I'm from, there was a lot of questions as to whether or not Yitzchak Rabin was doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And there was a man by the name of Yigal Amir who ended up assassinating him. And I actually think he's a really important person to speak about, Lisa.
Yeah, well, you told me you needed 10 minutes, so I was going to give you a little bit more time. But
okay.
Normally we try not to pay attention to the assassin, right? When there's a mass shooting, we try and focus exclusively on the victims, not the perpetrator. So what's different? What's different in this case?
So this is the hardest part for me. But I think it's actually the most salient educational point. I assume that the people on this call are from a modern Orthodox community, from a religious Zionist community. And, we take pride in our community. And Yigal Amir is the assassin. Yigal Amir wasn't some dummy. He had a 144 IQ. Okay.
Wow.
Yigal Amir wasn't somebody, yeah, very impressive, right? Yigal Amir wasn't somebody who was just a crazy human being. He was somebody who was brought up in the finest yeshivot, went to Bar Ilan University. And Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, said about him the following. It's a quote that I want us to think about. Here's what he says. Naturally, the shame of this moment should be felt by our camp, us, the national religious group, more than any other. Here was a man who grew up in the best of our institutions. A day before the murder, he could have been cited as a shining example of success and achievement and a source of communal pride. But if a day before the murder, we would have said proudly, see what we have produced, we must say it now as well. See what we have produced. It is indefensible that one who is willing to take credit when the sun is shining should shrug off responsibility when it begins to rain. And what Rav Aaron Lichtenstein is saying, Rav Aaron Zecher Tzadik Levracha is saying, is that within the community, there was serious hostility towards Rabin. Serious hostility towards Rabin. There were people that dressed Rabin up like in effigy, like Yasser Arafat. They put Rabin in SS officer uniforms, right? They would scream Mavet la Rabin, death to Rabin. And Rav Aaron was saying, if this sort of thing can come from within our ranks, then we have to look inwardly. We have to say, what can we do as a religious community to continue to foster the passion, the conviction that we all have, the zeal and the gratitude for Medinat Yisrael on the one hand, and on the other hand, how can we temper that with a moderateness and a healthy level of healthy behavior? Don't look at, there were two halachot. Halacha number one that Yigal Amir looked at was Din Moser, and the second one was called Din Rodef. So Din Moser is this idea, just to explain it to people. Why did he kill Rabin? For lots of different reasons. One of them is this idea of Din Moser. Din Moser is a person who hands over a Jew to a hostile power. And what Yigal Amir felt was that Rabin giving land to the Palestinians, then he was therefore over on the Aveira of Moser, of Misirah. And the second thing was Din Rodef. Din Rodef is a person who's pursuing another, and the idea is they're going to cause a death, and the halacha is one that needs to step in on behalf of the nirdaf, the person being pursued, and he felt Rabin's policies were undermining the safety of settlers in the West Bank and in Gaza, in Yudan V'Shomron, right? Judea and Samaria. And because of that, he took matters into his own hands and he said, you know what? This is what I got to do. I'm going to do it. And he ended up taking matters in his own hand. And so, I think that we have to look inwardly and say, how could we make sure that that sort of thing doesn't ever come from our ranks again? And Baruch Hashem, it hasn't. And thank God we have leaders like Rav Aaron Lichtenstein or Rav Yoel Ben Nun who spoke adamantly against this. And because we have leaders like them in our lives and in our Torah and our teachings, we're able to live this life of a moderate, healthy religious identity.
Right. Noam, I want to just, for those out there in the audience that aren't Rav Aaron Lichtenstein and Yoel Ben Nun and these names that you're throwing out, they're the Rosh Yeshiva of Gush Etzion.
Yeah, thank you.
That has their yeshiva, just in case people aren't 100% sure who you're referring to. If I may, I'm yesterday in yesterday's Wall Street Journal, I don't know who gets it, but on the opinion page, there was an article, how Rabin's assassination gave new life to Oslo. And it was written by Gil Troy and by Natan Sharansky. And our scholar in residence, Noam, actually did a fabulous interview with Natan Sharansky. If anyone's interested, you could get in touch with me and I'll send you the link to it. It was amazing. But Noam, you brought up something that was in the article saying the people that were against the peace accord that Rabin was hosting, they, like you said, they dressed up as Arafat and they dressed up as SS and SS uniforms. And one of the questions that Natan Sharansky asked was that, did we dehumanize our opponents? Did we fuel this lynch mob atmosphere? What the article was saying was that with the assassination of Rabin, forget about the Oslo Accord. It was really like to democracy. And it's really crazy how, his yahrzeit was yesterday, the day after the election. And it's right, there's so many overlapping themes going on. Sure. And, really the punchline, I think, is the importance not only of tolerance, right, but of true acceptance of our fellow citizens and their right to disagree with one another, right?
Absolutely. It's the idea that you should argue like you're right and listen like you're wrong, right? And if you could argue like you're right and listen like you're wrong, if you're able to have the humility to be open to think again. There's a book coming out by Adam Grant in February. I think it's called like Rethink or Think Again. It's all about this idea, like the idea to be willing to be wrong about something, the idea to be open to disagree with someone, the willingness to, ensure that there's a difference of opinions as opposed to, indifference. That's a problem. Indifference is a problem, not difference of opinions. The battle, like that's really what our battle is. We want people to care about things, but care about things in a way that's healthy, care about things in a way that's, respectful and nuanced. And I think that like in Israel, what's happened, and it's sad, is Rabin's death and assassination has been politicized, right? On the right, they use it to talk about how people now basically blame Bibi and people like him for instigating everything. And people on the left say that Yigal Amir had two deaths at that moment. He didn't just kill Rabin, he killed the peace process, right? And so then his death becomes politicized. But for me, I think that he's so important to remember for other reasons beyond that. And I don't want to politicize his death. What I want to do is I want to honor his death. There's the idea in Kohelet that, Tov alecha el beit avel milecha lebeit mishteh. It's better to go to a house of mourning than it is to go to a party. The reason for that idea, because you're able to learn so much about someone's life and you're able to internalize it for yourself. So like one story I just want to share about Yitzchak Rabin to understand him. 1967, he's the one that's been building up this Air Force with his deputy, Weissman. And just to understand how seriously he took this and who he was as a person. He's getting ready for 67. It's called the Hamtana. It's this period right before the 6-Day War. And there's so much nerve, so much anxiety in the air. And what Rabin ends up doing, he ends up having so much anxiety, he was so nervous about it because he put the entire world on his head. Everything, the entire situation, he put on his back. And he said, I'm the leader. I brought them into this situation. I need to be successful. And he had so much anxiety, he actually had to get like some sort of shot to calm him down. He was so nervous. But then after he calmed down and he went through that process, he led them. This is a human being who felt. This is a human being who felt like it was his job to forge forward and to make sure that the Jewish people had a good, safe, secure destiny. The reason Rabin wanted peace is because Rabin was a man of security, not because he was a pacifist. And because of that, I want to remember his life. And one of the things about him that I'm so passionate about is that I believe that he was a human being that had passion and conviction without sacrificing compassion. And when you're able to live a life like that, I think that you're living an incredibly Jewish life. And that's what I want to memorialize today.
So, Noam, I know that you wrote a 188-page dissertation for your PhD on the following question. And I think it's a really good, for our listeners out there, if you could explain to me what the difference between Israel education is and Israel advocacy, okay? And why Israel education is so important to you.
Yeah, so So, I'm trying to break that down to like 2 minutes. So my answer is go to my YouTube channel, go to Unpacked, and you'll see all the videos. Check out the podcast, Unpacking Israeli History.
Well, they don't have to do that all because you're going to do it with us in Hollywood. We're going to do this. We're going to
listen to the podcast, generously sponsored by Andrea and Larry Gill. And listen, check it all out. Make sure to listen to all the content. Here's my the tachlis, the answer to the question looks like this. Good Israel education is good Jewish education. Good Jewish education is good education. Okay? So good Israel education is good education. It's like a little mathematical thing we just did there. Advocacy, and I don't have a problem with it, but I want to describe it. Advocacy says, I have the truth. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you to the truth. There aren't multiple perspectives on this. Here's the truth. And I want you to have these talking points so that when you are on the defensive, you're ready to fight the good fight, right? That's advocacy. I'm just boiling it down into a sentence or two. It's kind of like, it's in some ways, it's the educational political equivalent to kiruv in a way. Like it's I have a truth and I want to bring you to that. I want to bring you to that story. Israel education is education. It's saying, it's like Parshanut Mikra, Lisa. You're like a Tanakh whiz, right? So it's like there's a pasuk in the Torah, right? There's a pasuk in the Torah, and Rashi says something, Rashbam says something, Ibn Ezra says something, Ramban says something, and the whole beauty of learning Torah is learning the multiple perspectives on a specific issue. And Israel education, as opposed to Israel advocacy, what I like to say is it's taking a mikra'ot zolot approach to Israel education. That's the idea. Are we sophisticated enough to be able to deeply connect with Israel, care about Israel, make our life all about Israel, and also make room for others to have difference of opinions? Also understand where others are coming from. Also understand that there are textures and perspectives and layers here, right? So that's education as opposed to advocacy. And they both have an important place in the Jewish ecosystem, but they're different. And I don't like when people confuse the two. So we're going to work on that together.
Well, I'm happy you said that because that was how I was going to conclude. I look forward, and even without speaking to all the people that have logged on, to continuing our Israel education with our new Hollywood scholar in residence, Dr. Noam Weissman. And I thank you so much for offering to do this for us. Yep. In this odd introduction via Zoom.
All good.
But I mean, it was an opportunity we couldn't afford to miss with the yahrzeit being yesterday. I mean, it was perfect. It was just perfection and so meaningful. So I want to really thank you so much for offering, Lisa, and for being wonderful.
I want to thank you, and I want to thank Young Israel of Hollywood for hosting me, and I want to thank the Hollywood community for being so incredible to my wife, Terezi, and to our 3 little kids. And we are incredibly excited to be here. I'm looking forward to learning Torah with everyone, to hanging out with everyone, to beating everyone in basketball, to beating everyone at basketball, right? And to just spend more time getting to know one another. So let's take the lessons, I think, from Yitzchak Rabin's life. Let's internalize it for ourselves. And let's hopefully make sure that we could spend our time staying in the rhythm and the sync of the Jewish people to help make sure that Israel and America are together at the same time, thinking about the same things. And then I think we're Am Echad, Lev Echad, and that's true Achdut, and we have a Brit Ye'ud that we're forging forward to that destiny together. So that's the goal. So thank you all. Let's continue.
Amen. Thank you. Good Shabbos to everybody. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom u'mivarach. Bye.
Thank you, Lisa. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Noam. Former Angelino. Yay.
Hi, Tammy and Al.
Hi, Lee.
Hi, Lily.
Excellent.
Good night.
Hey, Lisa.
Stop.
Hi, David.
Lisa, thank you. That was really wonderful.
Thank you,
you.
David.
Good work. Kol hakavod.
Okay, Lisa.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rabbi Freiberg. Thank you so
Great.
much. Thank you. Hi,
Thank
Mom.
you.
Good Shabbos. Good night.